Hello everyone and welcome back to Always Watching. Today we are talking about Titan, the OceanGate disaster. Briefly, the documentary details the fatal dive that killed 5 people, including the company's CEO. The documentary focuses largely on unpacking the life of founder Stockton Rush to explain how the disaster was not only a tragedy, but an inevitability. The film interviews former employees, journalists, YouTubers, and whistleblowers, as well as family members who died on board. Although Rush has passed, there is enough evidence in this documentary to hold him mostly responsible for what took place. These whistleblowers came with receipts, they had emails, phone recordings of conversations with him, text messages, reports. Something that struck out at me is how enamored everybody was by him. It wasn't clear until the disaster struck just how badly they had been deceived. What also struck out at me is how from the very beginning, everyone who worked at OceanGate knew this day would come. They spoke as if they couldn't believe it didn't happen sooner. Those who worked at the company explained how right off the bat, they assumed the worst, while the rest of the world held on to the possibility that they could be alive. I think this documentary did an excellent job of unpacking the God complex that led to this catastrophe, as well as the dangers of commodifying Mother Nature. The documentary begins with Rush being bolted into the Titan. The Titan was built to carry explorers into the unknown. Instead, it became a death trap. The longer the documentary goes on for, the more jarring and terrifying Stockton Rush becomes. They conducted test after test showing how unsafe the Titan was, and yet every single time, Stockton chose to bolt himself inside. I think he truly believed he was untouchable. Towards the end of the documentary, he remarks that the company might fail, but no one will die on his watch. However, in this line of work, death is the failure. I mean, if the company fails, it means you lost customers. Like, there aren't really any other markers to measure this. Rush was selling dreams. He was captivated by the idea of achieving greatness, and he saw the ocean as this unclaimed frontier, something that he could own and conquer before anyone else. When you think about space, space is quite crowded. You have Jeff, you have Elon, you have all these billionaires vying for these planets. With enough resources, Rush believed he could become a pioneer in this area. He reminded me of Elizabeth Holmes, the founder of the defunct Theranos, a company that claimed to revolutionize the blood testing industry. Like Rush, Elizabeth came from immense privilege and wealth, and she also believed that she was destined for greatness. However, her passion wasn't rooted in medicine or trying to save customers time and resources. It was rooted in herself. To this day, she maintains that if she just had enough time, it would have worked. With regards to Stockton Rush, they kept saying he didn't understand the science. He was a C student. He managed to get by on his generational wealth. However, I think he understood the science. I genuinely don't think, based on the footage that we see, I just don't think he cared all that much. Prior to the Titan, only 4 submersibles could reach the Titanic. What made the Titan unique was the material being used to build it. Traditionally, you would use material like steel or titanium. The issue is these materials are very expensive and extremely heavy. Roughly 90% of the cost in this industry is building the submersible and then transporting it. If you can successfully build a submersible using carbon fiber, you can commercialize trips to the Titanic, making them quote-unquote affordable for the average person. The issue with carbon fiber is no one really knew anything regarding its capacity underwater. At the start, I think Stockton was well-intentioned. He hired the best engineers, the best scientists, and at one point he involved Boeing. And I think he believed if he just hired enough talented people, someone would figure something out. Because these scientists knew very little about this material's capacity underwater, they were very excited. The documentary shows footage of Stockton undergoing test after test, clearly showing that carbon fiber was a dead end. This was not the best material to use to build this submersible. Carbon fiber is made up of strings of carbon, which can break easily under the wrong conditions. At one point, they designed this acoustic sound system so they could hear the carbon fibers breaking. And I don't know much about marine biology or submersibles, but I know enough to know that a pop is bad. And one pop would have been enough for me to scream, "Get me out of here." One scene that really baffled me was of Rush in the Titan all alone, and you could actually hear the pops increasing in frequency and speed, and he seemed totally unfazed by the whole thing. With each failure, he doubles down. Rather than brainstorm ways to make it safer, he brainstorms ways to make it appear safer. And he starts developing these tools to monitor the pops so they know when to end the dive. And that's a bit ridiculous because once something starts breaking, you don't actually know when it's going to completely fall apart. Like the warning is the pop. After that, you're pretty much on your own. He also started promoting less qualified scientists because everyone who knew what they were talking about were fighting him tooth and nail. They also started spray painting and decorating the Titan to make it appear a lot stronger than it really was. Stockton Rush was very good at PR, and he was very good at putting on this facade. I mean, this man would fake tests so that these trips could be approved. And I think it's one thing to test with individuals who know that they're putting their life at risk, like marine biologists or engineers. It's another thing to put customers in that situation. Not only is this unethical, I don't even know how this is possible. The people paying Rush want to see the Titanic. They've done their research on the Titanic, not on a submersible. The customers, even as a customer, you're assuming that the watchdogs and oversight committees have done their job. And I thought the idea of calling customers mission specialists was really devious. It reduces the company's culpability if something were to happen. Now, I think what disturbed me is when you think about risk in this field, death is the risk. Like, this is really like life or death situation. Like, there's no other way to measure success. Every trip, he was essentially playing Russian roulette with their lives, and they would sign these contracts, basically signing away their life. And again, you're assuming as a customer that they've done all their due diligence, and so there's really no reason to think anything would go horribly wrong. Stockton came from a background where he was very used to getting his way and using his privilege and wealth to move through life. And as more and more employees started fighting against him, he seemed totally unbothered. I mean, his response was, mess around and find out. There was only one employee that tried to fight him in a court of law. And it seems like Stockton had friends in very high places because they didn't really get very far. You guys let me know what you think when you're watching the documentary, but everyone who worked at OceanGate knew that something bad was going to happen. And just trying to get this information out seemed like an uphill battle. Imagine just waiting to hear about a fatal accident. You know it's coming, you just don't know when. The first half of the documentary does a good job of introducing us to OceanGate and trying to get us to understand everything wrong with this company. And then the second half zooms out and introduces us to all the journalists and YouTubers. Everyone outside of OceanGate felt that they were in very safe hands. They never doubted a thing, and honestly, why would they? I would assume anything that has to do with the ocean or space has a lot of checks and balances. Like when you think about diving, you need a license. I mean, there's so much red tape before you're allowed to venture into these spaces. And so there was just no reason to doubt him. And to be honest, based on the number of failures, it was a miracle that he was able to have a few successful missions. And everyone seemed very baffled with each success. They were basically just crossing their fingers. And I'm not sure if the documentary answered this, but I Googled it. Each trip was about 12 to 15 hours. And I can't imagine how uncomfortable these trips were. Like, I would have loved to hear from customers who had done it before, because I would imagine like the popping, the frequency of the popping, like you could hear the carbon fibers popping, would make for a very uncomfortable trip. Like what is it like once you're down there? Because I can't imagine with this material, it was a very pleasant experience. The damage done to the submersible after each test was immense. You have these massive cracks, and even if the Titan was successful, I don't know how you would use it again because there's just so much damage being done after every trip. So I'm not really sure about how cost effective or efficient this would have been in the long run. One line that stood out to me is accessibility is ownership. If you can get to something that other people can't, by default, it becomes yours. I think that perfectly captures Stockton's mindset. He really didn't care about exploring or discovering anything. He just wanted to own and conquer it. He basically just wanted to plant a flag under the ocean. At one point, he states that luck is the #1 superpower. And I thought that was pretty rich coming from a guy who has been riddled with good fortune his whole life. He came from generational wealth. It's honestly not that difficult for a man like that to secure funding and build this cult following. Unfortunately, his luck was our misfortune. What makes stories like this unsettling is, again, you just assume there's oversight. Like, you assume that these people are acting out of good faith. And even if they're not, someone will eventually stop it. Because a lot of these projects are driven by men with unlimited resources, they have the power to bypass a lot of these checks and balances, leaving the customer completely stranded. Rush spent more time trying to appear competent than trying to become competent. And sadly, liability here goes beyond a physical injury. I mean, these are literally life or death situations. And I was quite astonished by how far he was able to get. And he didn't hesitate. He didn't blink. He really didn't care. I mean, this project, this carbon fiber submersible, wasn't even almost okay. And I think it speaks to a much bigger issue. Prior to OceanGate, very few people outside of scientists, marine biologists, James Cameron, could visit the Titanic. And honestly, this is for good reason. And making something accessible does not mean commodifying it. What set this company apart is Stockton tied its success to his own ego and ambition. And his ego completely blinded him from concerns other than his own, most critically being the safety and security of the people, trusting them with their lives. And so overall, I really enjoyed this documentary. I think it's definitely worth a watch. So if you've seen it, let me know. And